I don't want to like burn the place up with the coffee maker and ruin a monitor and be like, okay, screw you. I'm finding a different person to talk about fantasy football. All right.
All right. Here we go.
Hey everybody, welcome to FFB from the 50. I'm your host, Dan Amsler.
Nah. You did that wrong. I'm Dan Amsler. Folks, welcome to another episode of FFB from the 50. Tonight I am joined for this fireside chat with none other than the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. JDP himself. On this side of the camera, look at that face, folks. We need to get this man on this side more often. We have a trained actor in our midst. This man just admitted to me that he's been on a couple TV shows. He was on North Shore and Lost. We got to get him on this side of the camera, right? All right, Joe, welcome to this side of the camera. You excited for tonight?
Yes, I am.
What do you want to talk about?
FFB
From
the 50.
With
Dan Amsler.
Hey, that's me. He got it right that time. All right, so tonight... All right, folks. Tonight we're going to start talking about some fantasy football players. We are 3 weeks in. We're going to take a look at these guys that are trending in the right direction, trending in the wrong direction. We're going to take a look at the top 10 fantasy scores for your flex position. And we're going to try to figure out... I'm going to make you sing tonight, Joe. Which one of these guys just doesn't belong here? All right. So, before the season started, Joe and I had a lot of conversations. And my buddy Adam, Teresa, another shout out to you two. We had a lot of conversations about who we should take in the first rounds of the fantasy football drafts. And one of the consensuses that we came to is that it was really safer to take wide receivers than running backs. Now, every year those running backs go early. There's no doubt about it. But we've noticed a trend. So, Joe, I went ahead and printed out these sheets for us. So, taking a look last year, the top 10 fantasy scores. Now, we're only looking at the flex position. We're not talking about quarterbacks. We're not talking about kickers and defenses. We're only talking about flex-eligible players, right? So we're talking about running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. And this is PPR scoring settings. I'm looking at this, and last year in 2021, out of the top 10 finishers, 6 were wide receivers, 3 were running backs, and only 1 was a tight end. All right? So I'm going to read these names off. I want you to let me know if any of these guys really come as a huge surprise to you. So, Cooper Kupp last year was the number 1 scoring player in PPR. Does that come as a surprise?
No.
Probably not. I mean, saw what he did, right? Jonathan Taylor?
No, that is not a surprise.
Okay. Devontae Adams?
Not a surprise.
Deebo Samuel?
Not a surprise.
Austin Eckler? Had 20 touchdowns last year.
Yeah, I mean he was worth it. Yeah, I mean he was a big deal.
Okay. Justin Jefferson?
Was Justin Jefferson was he a rookie last year or was that the year before?
That was 2 years. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Last year was his sophomore season. But he was what, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 overall?
Okay. I mean he had a great rookie year.
Right. Jamar Chase, a rookie.
That is a big surprise.
I was going to say last
because
year
nobody
Jamar
knew
Chase,
who he was. Yeah, I mean everybody knew who he was, but he hasn't proven. He didn't prove anything.
Came
yet.
in as a rookie. And if you remember last year, all the talk in training camp was how he couldn't catch the ball. He kept dropping the ball.
Oh,
right.
Well, and I got him confused because Jefferson was the year before.
Right.
And to have back-to-back years that are rookies,
right,
is not common.
That produce like that.
That is not
pretty
common.
Crazy. All right. So last year, number 8 was Tyreek Hill. Number 9.
Not surprised. Yeah.
Najee Harris, another
not
rookie.
Surprised with that.
Okay. Yep. I mean, he came in. He was the first overall pick in our Dynasty League.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knew he was going to go first overall in Dynasty. And number 10 was a tight end, Mark Andrews.
Yeah, that is a surprise.
You know, so it's kind of interesting when you look at the scoring from the last several years. We've seen tight ends up there, but it's been Travis Kelce, right?
Yeah.
You know, Darren Waller a couple of years ago, he had a really good season. So, but looking at that, I guess for me the breakdown, I find the breakdown very interesting. So 6 wide receivers, 3 running backs, only 1 tight end. Okay. So looking at this year, let's see if that trend continues. So in week 1, the top 10 scorers for the flex option in week 1 were Jefferson, Saquon Barkley, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, who a lot of people were really high on in the preseason, DeAndre Swift, another running back that a lot of folks were high on, and Stephon Diggs. All right, so week 1, those top scorers, 7 were wide receivers, only 3 running backs.
Yeah.
So, looking at these names, I don't know that any of those guys would necessarily be a huge surprise. But again, when you go back and you look at the fantasy football drafts, we see a lot of these running backs get taken right away. I mean, I think in a lot of leagues, throw out Justin Jefferson, he was taken pretty high up there too. But folks, go down to the comments section. Let me know who the top 5 picks were in your fantasy leagues. Because I know in ours, it was guys like Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, we saw Dalvin Cook go early. Austin Eckler was a top 5 pick in a lot of these leagues. It seemed like those top 4 or 5 picks, Najee Harris, was an early pick. We saw guys like Joe Mixon go in the first round. We saw a lot of running backs go early, but last year looking at the numbers, really, if you're just looking at the top 10 picks, let's say you're in a 10-person league, 6 of those guys were wide receivers, not running backs. Week 1, 7 were wide receivers, 3 were running backs. Now, I know Dave and I talked in the last Fireside chat about how the league has shifted. It used to be back when we first started playing fantasy football, there was a lot of running backs. Now, it seems like those wide receivers are those higher scoring. So, what is your take on that? Because I'm really interested. I know my take. I've heard Dave's take on it. We're both proponents that the league rules have changed so much that it really favors the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. But what is your take? Why are we seeing this wide receiver crazy trend in the top 10?
Well, I think a lot of these receivers now, they're getting a lot more targets than normal. An example like Cooper Kupp, the way they throw to him out of the slot, where he's doing quick little in outs, bubble screens,
Slants.
He's getting slants very quick. Yes, very quick. It's nothing for him to get 150 targets in a year. So. Kind of goes back to the old Tom Brady version of, running through his quick little dump-offs, Jamar Chase, we watched that game a little bit, the highlights of it. There were many catches that he had that were just little dump-offs,
Right.
He went 2 yards down the field, just dump it off to him and let the athletes run.
Right.
So I think that does have something to do with it. The guys that I find interesting are like the Justin Jeffersons and the A.J. Brown also plays a little bit slot, but like Jefferson, a lot of times he's on the outside.
Right.
Like he's a full-on outside guy. And for him to get as many targets as he does, that's not normal.
Right.
That's not normal.
Yeah, so he's kind of the freak exception to that rule.
Where Devontae, they can move around everywhere. Obviously Cooper, they move around everywhere.
Right. So almost kind of harkens back to the old West Coast offense, right? Where that passing game was actually a part of the run game. And folks, I don't know if you were able to watch any of the Detroit Lions versus the Minnesota Vikings game this week, but Detroit went for it on 4th down, I think 4 or 5 times, and it wasn't runs.
Yeah.
I mean, Jared Goff was making these passes. 4th and 2, they were dialing up Jared Goff on a quick screen out to Amon-Ra St. Brown or, DJ Chark on a slant across the middle. I think you're right because we're seeing a lot of those targets within the first 5 yards. That's probably it. So let's take a look at week 2.
Well, and I think also, too, with the running backs, we've never seen running backs. Now it's been a few years now, but the amount of targets that running backs get now versus 10 years ago, it's crazy.
Right.
It's crazy. I mean, it's nothing for a guy in a 2-minute offense to get 4 or 5 targets.
Right, just get peppered.
And it's kind of just peppered, just boom, boom, boom. Yeah, depending on what defense they're running.
Right.
If they're giving the flats, just give it to them every single time.
Yep, settle for those 5-yard gains.
Yeah, especially if it's one of your best athletes.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because, we've talked about the bell cow backs in the past. Dave and I talked about that last week on the Fireside chat. You don't really have those. You have your early down backs. You have your third down back. Sometimes you even specialize and have a goal line back. But it's kind of interesting. There's no running backs that are getting, very few. There are a few, but very few running backs that are getting 20 carries per game. But it seems like these number one wide receivers on a team, they may get anywhere from 10 to 15 targets per game. I mean, so folks, if you're thinking about that, it's like a running back getting 10 to 15 carries. Fantasy football is a stat-driven game. It's all about opportunity. those targets equal opportunity.
Absolutely.
Now, what they do with
Absolutely.
that, I mean, we've seen some guys that may get 15 targets but only catch 6 passes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's other guys that get 15 targets and get 14 catches, and in a PPR setting, that's 14 points.
Yeah, who was it that who was it on my squad that had a bunch of targets, but
Yeah, so
I pointed him out.
Christian Kirk is one of them that's got a lot of targets.
Well, who's the one that didn't get many catches though?
Yeah, let's take a look because that happened to you this week,
Yeah.
or this past week, and that was an interesting setup. So let's go out here and take a look. So, folks, just so you guys know, Joe and I are both in a dynasty league together, and that's the league that we're talking about. So a lot of the stats that we talk about are based upon the stats in this particular league. All right, so target share.
Yeah, and I'm so in touch that I have to ask Dan, who is a competitor of mine, of what my guy's stats are. So yeah, that's how in touch I am with it. So.
That's all right. Yeah, Christian Kirk had 9 targets, only 6 catches, but
Brandon
Cooks.
Cooks.
Was
Brandon
the bad
Cooks.
one.
That's
Yeah.
who it was. Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, because we were talking about Davis Mills' inefficiency
Yeah.
in a side conversation against the Bears. Yeah, he had 7 targets, but anyway, turned those into 2 catches for 22 yards.
Yeah.
So not
He's
a lot.
below 50%
Well
on
below.
his targets.
Yeah.
To,
Well below. So, and the thing is, like, not all opportunities are created even. And we know this from fantasy football, right? You want to be on a highly efficient, high-profile offense, but that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so now, looking at week 2, Joe, it's even crazier. So, week 1, we had 7 wide receivers and 3 running backs in the top 10. Week 2, there was only 2 running backs. So, folks, for, again, flex purposes only and a PPR scoring setting, week 2, the top 4 scorers were all wide receivers. Now, what's crazy about week 2, 2 of those wide receivers play for the same team.
Mm.
All right, so in order, folks, week 2, number 1 scorer, Tyreek Hill.
Mm.
Number 2, Stephon Diggs. Number 3, Jalen Waddle. So that's the 2 teammates, the Miami Dolphins. Number 4, Amon-Ra St. Brown. 5 was Nick Chubb. 6, Aaron Jones. 7, Cooper Kupp. 8, Garrett Wilson. 9, Christian Kirk. And number 10 was Mark Andrews. So in week 2, we had 7 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and a tight end. So there's that tight end.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like between Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, there's always one that hits there. So very interesting breakdown, right?
Absolutely.
Now, out of those names, looking at this, so Tyreek Hill, does it surprise me that he wound up in the top 10? No. Stephon Diggs? No. Jalen Waddle a little bit, just because you don't expect 2 teammates to both wind up in the top 3.
Exactly.
So
He did have 100 catches last year, though.
He did.
He's
explosive.
He's special. He's special, but yeah, you're right. You don't expect
2 from the
2,
same team, right?
But
Number
Tua
4.
is doing big things.
He is doing big things.
Doing
And
big
folks,
things.
we're going to actually talk about Tua in the next Fireside Chat. Dave's joining me again. So make sure you come back because we're going to actually take a dive into Tua and try to figure out if this guy's for real or not. So
St. Louis's finest.
St. Louis's finest. All right. Number 4, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for a lot of folks, that might come as a surprise because Detroit doesn't get a lot of fanfare. For me, it really doesn't. I had Amon-Ra St. Brown on one of my teams last year. Dude's a stud.
Yeah,
Flat out baller.
he
He
is.
gets targeted a bunch. He has the opportunity. And Jared Goff, say what you will. I mean, that offense, they may not be the most explosive, although this year much more so than last year. They are highly efficient. So for me, Amon-Ra St. Brown was not a huge surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Chubb, does that
It's
surprise
not a
you?
surprise to me.
Okay, Aaron
No,
Jones.
Nick Chubb is prone to break many tackles, incredible yards per carry,
Right.
and
I think he averages over 5 yards
Yeah,
per carry
for
in
his
career,
career.
like 5.6 or something.
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
It's crazy.
and that's because he'll it's nothing for him to break a 60-yarder.
right.
Do you remember his? Do you remember back in high school what he did?
Tell me more.
So he's from Georgia,
Okay.
and I could be wrong on this.
I know we
but-
went to college in Georgia, right?
Yeah, but he's
He's
from
Bulldog.
high school, and he won both the 100-meter dash and
Yeah.
shot put. There's a well-known photo of him just warming up, and he's just jumping up in the air, and he's bringing his legs up, and he's above all the other runners when he's just jumping, warming up. He's an
Freakish.
absolute freak.
Freakish athlete.
In a state like Georgia, to be the fastest and to throw the furthest, I think he's the last one to do it since Herschel Walker.
Jeez.
That's how freakish he is.
Right. And the thing about Nick Chubb, if you're a fantasy owner, in standard scoring, you got to love him, right? PPR scoring, I mean, that's what the scoring settings are. These are PPR, so
Yeah,
does it matter
yes.
that he doesn't get the catches? I mean, the problem
Well, yeah,
the problem with Chubb is he may go off for 140 yards in a game, but without a touchdown or a catch, that's only 14 points, right? So, but man,
Well, I think the problem with Chubb is he has
Kareem Hunt,
Kareem Hunt. That's his problem.
right? Dude, can you imagine? Just imagine if Kareem Hunt gets traded, how valuable Chubb will be next year.
Oh, yeah.
Because they'll have Deshaun Watson. Hopefully, the offense will open up even more. Brissett played really well this week, though. No complaints about his performance against Pittsburgh, but man, that could be scary good.
Oh,
scary
absolutely.
good. And folks, just so you all know, Dave Leeper that comes in here and does the Fireside Chat actually has Nick Chubb in the Dynasty League, so I may hold him ransom.
Yeah.
Tell me he has to trade him to me because
Yeah.
dude's a stud. All right, so Aaron Jones, is that a surprise being in the top 10?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he has his moments.
Right, Cooper
He's
Kupp.
sharing time too.
Right, yeah.
you know.
AJ Dillon's there taking some of it a little bit.
But Rodgers is going to dump it down to him all day long, and
And we saw that.
You know,
like, he had
yeah.
a touchdown on the ground, but he also had a receiving touchdown
Yeah.
week 2. So, yep. All right, Cooper Kupp?
nope.
No, of course not. All right, here's an interesting one. Number 8, Garrett Wilson, a rookie.
Yes.
Folks, I just got to be honest with you. This is no knock on Garrett Wilson. I think he's very talented. We saw what he was able to do in college. He's a Jet, and he's a rookie. So for him to crack the top 10, I think that's pretty impressive. So for me, that's a surprise. Okay? Number 9, Christian Kirk. You know all about him because you've got him on your
Yeah, I
Dynasty
have him
League.
on my team.
So, I mean,
I knew he was going to do it.
that's why you drafted him.
Yep.
In the 13th, 14th round, something like that.
Yeah, that's why I drafted him.
All right. Mark Andrews. Probably not. He was top 10
Not
last
surprised,
year, right?
Yeah.